Okay, members, the assembly is back in session. We're going to continue on the concurrence items, starting with item 22. So will the following members please come to the floor? Williams, Amiano, Solorio, Logue, Monning, Lara, Conway, Williams, Hueso, and Gordon, if you're not already here.
Colleagues, we ask all Assembly members to get back to the floor unless you are in a committee. We ask all Assembly members to return to the floor unless you are in a committee. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very full schedule today. We have a lot we need to get through. For that reason, we are going to enforce the quorum call very strictly. We're also going to enforce the rules very strictly. We have a lot to get through today.
Okay, we are going to take file item 116, SB 126. We'll take up that bill first. Fall item 116, SB 126. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 126 by Senator Steinberg and others, an act relating to employment.
Mr. Alejo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I rise as a proud joint author of this bill. Senate Bill 126 by Senator Steinberg and proposed by Governor Brown addresses employer misconduct in union elections and the protection of agricultural employee rights. In 1975, Governor Brown signed into law the Agricultural Labor Relations Act, the ALRA. The intent and policy of the ALRA was clearly stated in the statute. It reads, and I quote, "To encourage and protect the right of farm workers to act together to help themselves, to prohibit employers from interfering with these rights, and protect the rights of workers to be free from restraint and coercion by unions or employers." It has become apparent that the law is flawed. There are zero consequences when an employer is found guilty of cheating farm workers out of their right to an intimidation-free secret ballot election. The past couple of weeks, the United Farm Workers marched 200 miles from Madera to the state capitol, through the Central Valley, through some extreme heat, in support of the Fair Treatment for Farm Workers Act. While the UFW and the legislature believes a farm worker's ability to enforce the state's laws.
Ms. Grove, state your point of order.
Mr. Alejo is reading on the floor without permission to read on the floor.
That's already done. Come on.
You may continue, Mr. Alejo.
Please. I appreciate not being interrupted again, please. While the UFW and the legislature believe a farm worker's ability to enforce state laws and protect themselves from intimidation is offered through an alternative majority sign-up election, we applaud the governor for his willingness to take a significant step towards the Fair Treatment for Farm Workers Act. Governor Brown offers a framework reflected in SB 126 that provides a remedy for when employers illegally intimidate workers, which impacts ALRB election results. In one of the most recent decisions regarding employer election misconduct, the ALRB highlighted the fact that the current law does not permit the ALRB to order any remedy to address employer election misconduct. In fact, the board noted that the laws in its current state allows employers to, quote-unquote, profit by violating the law. SB 126 gives the ALRB authority to provide a remedy in cases involving employer misconduct. The labor organization shall be certified as the exclusive bargaining representative and order collective bargaining in these types of cases. The ALRB is also given authority to seek court orders to protect the rights of agricultural employees. In addition, the bill helps to speed up the ALRB process when employer wrongdoing is found and provides changes to procedures for using the existing mediation process. Again, this bill is targeted to address employer misconduct, those acting in bad faith only, to silence the rights of our hard and honest working farm workers. I respectfully ask for an aye vote here today.
Mr. Nielsen.
Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, this should be called lose an election, file an unfair labor practice charge, and become certified. This isn't collective bargaining, which is meant collective bargaining on an even playing field. This is a stacking of the deck. This is a remedy that far exceeds whatever the ULP may have been ordering the election to be set aside. Not then ordering as remedy, as has been history of the LRB, for another election, which gives the workers their opportunity, but no, it automatically then certifies a union. This bad idea was defeated in this institution one time before. It deserves to be defeated one time again. This is not justice. This is injustice. This is not collective bargaining, bring parties together. Even the NLRB does not act in such an arrogant way with such authorities. No, this is bad legislation that roundly deserves a no vote.
Mr. Berryhill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this is very, very bad policy, very dangerous policy, and it goes down a very slippery slope. You know, the sad thing is this could have been a bill that was worked out with agriculture. We were willing to be at the table and negotiate some language that we could have lived with, but that didn't happen. Instead, we end up with language that literally, if I go out and talk to my farm workers and I don't have at least a witness with me, if I go out and talk to my farm workers and one of them wants to say that claim that I did an unfair labor practice, they can literally unilaterally, the ALRB will have the power to unionize my ranch, whether my workers even want it or not. Maybe one did. That is way too much power for unelected, appointed bureaucrats. It also lowers the bar on the definition of what an unfair labor practice is. We could have had language that further defined that and probably been okay with this. But instead they chose to go down this path, and it's a very dangerous path. What industry will be next? Why is agriculture sorted out? What industry is next? And so with that, I strongly, strongly urge a no vote, and know that we're willing to go to the table and talk with the governor and try to negotiate some language that makes some sense, that both sides can work with. But this is simply stacking the deck against agriculture, and I might add, agriculture, one of the bright spots of this Golden State's economy right now, and we're going out to destroy it. And so I just urge all my colleagues to vote no on this bill.
Mr. Valadao.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in opposition to this bill. When this bill was vetoed by the governor, he mentioned in his veto message that he wanted agriculture, employers, and employees at the table when the next round came. And this one came to me as a surprise today. I didn't realize it was there. When I talked to my ag groups today, they do not support this. They weren't at the table. They weren't part of the conversation. If we're actually going to solve these problems, we need to have everyone at the table come up with a good common sense solution and then go forward. But last minute legislation like this is a disaster, and if we're actually looking to create jobs and help protect people, everybody has to be at the table. So I urge a no vote.
Mr. Monning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I rise in support of this timely reform. It is framed as a compromise worked out in discussions with Governor Brown, who, as you will recall, signed the original Agricultural Labor Relations Act into law in 1975, the first election law for farm workers anywhere in the United States. One of the provisions of the bill before us today allows for the consideration of issuance of a bargaining order only when there's been a finding of egregious unfair labor practices warranting a remedy that would include requiring negotiation with the aggrieved union upon proof in a due process hearing. I'll just share very briefly. In 1975, I represented the United Farm Workers Union in the E&J Gallo Winery election. We filed over 30 unfair labor practices. We got a hearing in 1977. We were upheld on all of the unfair labor practices, including illegal surveillance, illegal collusion with another union, threats of intimidation, wrongful terminations, surveillance at people's housing. We were upheld in the hearing on all unfair labor practices in an order to set aside the election. The respondents appealed that decision, and the appeal process took until 1982 for the Court of Appeals to uphold every single one of those findings. In the meantime, the workforce, many had been terminated, they had left the area, and the award of a new election was a hollow award. And I would correct one of my colleagues in pointing out that under the National Labor Relations Act, there has been a long-standing remedy of a bargaining order. It is an extraordinary remedy. It is very rarely exercised, and as implemented in the contemplation of this bill, it's not a remedy of first resort. It is a remedy to bring balance and justice in an arena to affect the worst actors, not people who play by the rules, not people who follow election laws, for people who consciously violate the law. I urge and I vote.
Mr. Norby?
I'm a little confused, Madam Speaker. When I voted for this bill twice in committee and on the floor, It was a bill about transportation and the makeup of the State Transportation Committee. That's the way it was for months. And then I find a week ago the bill was completely changed. I know it's called gut and amend, but amend means to change or modify. This bill was completely replaced by a different bill, even though it has the same number. And as I read Article 4, Section 8, Part A of the California State Constitution, it says a bill has to be the same for at least 1 month before it's voted on. And page 8 of the Assembly Rules booklet, rule number 92, says any amendments must be germane to the original bill, which these obviously are not. So this whole process of gut and amend, completely replace, is an attempt to get around our established rules, and I think we all should be very concerned about it.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Alejo, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last Sunday, here at the state capitol in Sacramento, over 5,000 farm workers and supporters from all parts of California rose very early in the morning, got on their cars, got on buses to be here, asking all of us and asking Governor Brown to give them some justice, make some improvements in the laws that's going to improve their standard of living. We recognize, and we've debated here many times before, that California's farm workers continue to be some of the most exploited, endured some of the toughest conditions, doing the jobs that not many people want to do. There was even some folks who walked all 200 miles, and some of them are with us here today, and I wanted just to ask those farm workers that are here with us, si se pueden levantar, if you could rise so that the members here could see that you came asking for justice again.
Out of order, Mr. Alejo. Please finish your close.
As a child and grandchild of the migrant farm workers, my grandparents came here during the Bracero program, seeking a better life, seeking a better opportunity. My grandfather only went to the 3rd grade. My mother never had any formal education. And when they came here to this country as migrant farm workers, they faced some very tough conditions. Exposure to pesticides. They were not paid all the wages that they were owed. And when they joined the Farm Workers Union in 1970, one of the first families in the Pajaro and Salinas Valleys, their lives improved ever since then. Because of that, their children and grandchildren today have better opportunities. That's what these farm workers are asking for in this bill. They're asking for justice, better laws to improve their lives so that also their kids and their grandchildren will have better opportunities. Some people mentioned that any opposition. We just had a committee here in Labor and Employment. The representatives of the agriculture community were neutral on this bill. They expressed that in committee. This also, it sounded like earlier that some people were confused, thinking this was the previous bill that was debated on this floor last June. Well, they're mistaken. This is not that bill. This is not card check. This is a compromise bill. A compromise for farm workers is not everything the farm workers were asking for, but it is a much needed improvement in California's labor laws. So I'm here asking once again that we send this bill forward, send it to the Senate and then to the governor to sign this historic law. The ALRA has only been amended once since 1975. That year I was only 1 year old. So now to be here joint authoring this bill, it gives me great pleasure to give farm workers that improvement in this law, only the 2nd time in nearly 26 years. I ask for your aye vote in this bill.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 46, noes 24. Measure passes. Okay, we're going to start at the top of the concurrence file. I know that we skipped over some of them, so if members are ready to take them up, that'd be great. File item 5, AB 873. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 873 by Assemblymember Furutani, an act relating to the Political Reform Act of 1974.
Mr. Furutani.
Thank you, Mrs. Speaker and members. AB 873 is back for concurrence. AB 873 strengthens the revolving door and lobbying restrictions for board members and high-level staff at the California Public Employees Retirement System, CalPERS, and the California State Teachers Retirement System, CalSTRS. AB 873 addresses a key technical challenge associated with former state pension fund board members and staff tied to the 2009 placement agent scandal. The Senate amendment strengthened the bill by focusing where malfeasance and improper influence is most likely to occur, which is at the negotiation or awarding of the contract with CalSTRS and CalPERS. AB 873 has received bipartisan support and has received no votes. I urge and I vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Requires 54 votes. Mr. Furutani moves the call. File item 6, AB 1184. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1184 by Assemblymember Gatto, an act relating to public employees' retirement.
Mr. Gatto. Passed temporarily. File item 7, Mr. Wachowski, AB 291. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 291 by Assemblymember Wachowski, an act relating to underground storage tanks.
Mr. Wachowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. 291 preserves the viability of the California Underground Storage Tank Cleanup Fund. The amendments taken in the Senate merely added double joining language with this bill and Assembly Bill 358 by Assemblymember Smythe. I want to commend Assemblymember Shajian for his work on this bill with me, and I urge 54 members to support it.
Mr. Rasajian.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Permission to read?
Without objection.
Thank you. I rise in support of this bill. I want to thank Mr. Wachowski for his leadership role. This bill helps mom-and-pop operators to have that peace of mind that they won't have to walk away from their ownership of a location because of contamination on their property. A cleanup cost can be more than their lifetime savings, including their property and other investments. Let's not kill their American dream, their faith in free enterprise, and trust in their state government. I urge your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 54, noes 7. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 9, AB 913. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 913 by Assemblymember Fuhr, an act relating to hazardous waste.
Mr. Fuhr.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. This is an uncontroversial bill that simply would allow the state to help participate with green certification programs for small businesses in cities around the state of California. It has a support of small business and environmental organizations, and it has no opposition. I urge your support.
Mr. Mansour.
Thank you. Members, I rise in opposition to this bill, urge a no vote. I'm a strong supporter of creating green jobs in California. In fact, I'm a supporter of creating any jobs in California, and that's why I respectfully ask for a no vote on this item. This bill is more the same kind of policy that destroys jobs rather than creates them. We've all heard reports of various green job projects not coming to fruition due to prevailing wage requirements and other labor mandates. Solandra, a California solar company, recently announced that they're going out of business. This company received federal money as an incentive to create green jobs. Even the CEO blamed the closure on regulatory environment that creates uncertainty and cripples job creation. Colleagues, it's time for us to come to terms with the fact that the green economy we want to create in our state is absolutely incompatible with the labor union utopia that Democrats have built in past years. I urge a no vote. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Fuhr, you may close.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I want to point out this is one of those moments when I urge you just to read the bill. The bill has nothing to do about labor. The bill has nothing to do about unions. The bill has no opposition from any business group of any kind, nor any other organization in the state of California. If you look at the roster of supporters, however, you'll see a long list of small businesses in particular that strongly support a bill that enables a voluntary certification program that helps the business community to move forward. This bill has enjoyed bipartisan support in the past. I hope it continues to do so today. I urge your support for a bill that, again, has strong business community support and no opposition from any business organization in the state of California. Thank you.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 42, no 16. Senate amendments are concurred in. Okay, we're going to go out of order, and we're going to take file item 36, AB 628. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 628 by Assemblymember Conway, an act relating to vehicles.
Ms. Conway.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Members, I ask for your concurrence in some Senate amendments for this district bill. The amendments place a 10-mile cap on the proposed routes, give CHP final approval on the roadways selected throughout a local process, and includes reporting of the pilot program's effectiveness. Consistent with current law, AB 628 would require Caltrans approval for use of state highways. Under this pilot project, Inyo County will indemnify the state from any potential state liability. The changes will address the concerns raised on a similar bill I authored last year, which passed this body unanimously. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 52, noes 4. Senate amendments are concurred in. Okay, we're going to go to the first extraordinary session. Mr. Calderon.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I request unanimous consent to withdraw AB 40 from Committee on Budget and to take up amendments to allow Mr. Fuentes to take up those amendments at the desk, and to suspend Assembly Rule 63 to allow Mr. Fuentes to take up AB 40 as amended in mock-up form for purposes of third reading today.
Mr. Hagman.
Madam Speaker, I believe those are two separate requests, and we object to both of them. We'd like to have roll call votes on both of those requests.
The question is divisible. We'll take the first motion up first. Mr. Calderon requested unanimous consent to withdraw AB 40 from the Committee on Budget. Seconded by Mr. Fuhr. Mr. Hagman's asking for a roll call vote. Mr. Calderon asked for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman asked for a no vote. Clerk will open the roll. This is to withdraw the bill from committee. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 45, noes 23. Motion carries. The second one was to allow Mr. Fuentes to take up the amendments at the desk. So the second motion is to suspend Rule 63 to allow Mr. Fuentes to... Okay. Back to what I was saying originally. To allow Mr. Fuentes to take up the amendments. That's the second motion. Mr. Hagman, voice vote or roll call? Mr. Hagman asks for a roll call vote. Mr. Calderon moves. Mr. Fuhr seconds. Clerk will open the roll. Mr. Calderon asks for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman asks for a no vote. Okay, we got to strike the roll. Okay, so this motion is to allow Mr. Fuentes to take up his amendments without reference to file. Mr. Calderon asked for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman asked for a no vote. Clerk will open the roll. This is on the adoption of the amendments. Oh, clerk will read the amendments.
Assembly Bill 40 with amendments by Assemblymember Fuentes.
Clerk will open the roll. Mr. Calderon asked for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman asked for a no vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 46, noes 23. Motion carries. And the third motion is to suspend Assembly Rule 63 to allow Mr. Fuentes to take up AB 40 as amended in mock-up form for the purposes of third reading today. Mr. Hagman asked for an aye. Roll call vote. Yes. Mr. Calderon moves. Mr. Fuhrer seconds. Clerk will open the roll. Mr. Calderon asked for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman asked for a no vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 44, noes 23. Motion carries. AB 40 is now before us. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 40 by Assemblymember Fuentes, an act relating to taxation to take effect immediately. Tax levy.
Mr. Fuentes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to present to you Assembly Bill 40, a bipartisan measure that I've co-authored with Assemblymember Fletcher. This proposal is a fair and balanced compromise that will help put Californians back to work by overhauling and streamlining our tax code. Closing the single sales factor loophole will level the playing field and incentivize businesses to invest in creating jobs.
Point of order, Madam Speaker. We have no analysis on this in our desk yet. It's generally rules and customs to the House. At least we have the analysis or to see the bill in print. We don't have that yet. We'd like to hold this off until we at least get that part out.
Mr. Fuentes.
Can we pass temporarily on this item?
Okay, we can pass temporarily. Okay, we do have some budget bills in the extraordinary session that are ready on the concurrence file. File item 7, AB 16. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 16 by Assemblymember Blumenfield, an act relating to local government finance, making a preparation therefore to take effect immediately. Bill related to the budget.
Mr. Blumenfield.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, This bill includes technical and other statutory changes necessary to implement the 2011 public safety realignment. Most of this bill is the result of feedback from counties and other local stakeholders. The administration has been working with CSAC nonstop all year to make this transition work. The bill contains several changes to help counties implement the first year of public safety realignment. Among other changes, the bill does the following. It makes changes to realignment accounting, including clarity in viewing what amounts are not distributed and permitting funds within the newly created undistributed account to be used to reimburse the general fund. It inserts reporting requirements to the Joint Legislative Budget Committee on or before May 30, 2012 regarding the state of the local revenue fund, including estimated amounts used to reimburse the state and estimated use of funds in the undistributed account. It changes various program functions, refining realignment statute to conform to the intent of the 2011 realignment. And finally, it expresses our intent that further legislation enacted to implement realignment must provide sufficient funding for the child welfare services and foster care programs to protect kids. This is bill. There are a lot of differences of opinion in terms of the underlying bill, the public safety realignment. This bill is not about relitigating those differences. This bill is about making that bill a little bit better. So if you didn't like the bill the first time, I think the question is you ask yourself, does this make it a little bit better? If you liked the bill the first time, you also ask yourself that same question, does this make it a little bit better? Again, these are technical amendments to the underlying bill, and I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. For the Republican members, this is on your budget trailer bill, supplemental file. It's equivalent to SB4X for analysis. It says AB 16 on top. It's the same as our analysis for SB4. Thank you.
Mr. Nielsen.
Madam Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, the axiom around here is do not amend a bad bill. The entirety of realignment is bad, long-term and lasting consequences, particularly in terms of public safety, where life and property will be sacrificed for this folly of legislative realignment. These are not just technical things. As a matter of fact, public safety realignment in AB 109 has now been amended 5 times in the last year. So messy was its creation. Now, I predict it will be repealed. Unfortunately, now only after there's a lot of blood on the streets and hundreds of thousands of our constituents have become victims to criminal behavior. That's the wonderful product of this realignment. The entirety of realignment, the shifting to local government, that sounds so good because they can do it better. With the one rare exception of trial court funding, I'm never mindful of when anything being shifted from the state with the promises of the funding to follow, the word has been kept by local government. Some people in local government have supported this, and I would say that because they have been forced to, because there would be worse alternatives imposed upon them otherwise. Have you ever heard anyone in your local governments tell you that mandates from the state are good? I have not. But in this realignment that we're fine-tuning yet again, all of the mandates in place today are what they have to deal with prospectively. And the governor's plan has to put that into the Constitution. So are we going to keep our promise to local government? No, we aren't. All of these lovely programs conceived in this legislature over the years, foisted on local government for years of unfunded mandates, now will become theirs. This is not a shift or a realignment, ladies and gentlemen. This is a dump. A dump of state responsibility and problems fettered with all the requirements that we have imposed over the years on our local governments, an oppressive burden. And I can assure you, within months, surely within the year, your local governments will be descending upon you, complaining on this mess and how they can't handle it. They don't have enough money. They cannot live with the mandates. This is very dangerous. This isn't a slippery slope. This is jumping over the cliff and throwing our problems down that cliff into the abyss. Will land on the heads of local government and the people that we represent who will truly suffer. And then good people here will be pounding their chests and saying, I didn't mean to do that. Yes, you will be doing that. And the fingers will be pointing at you because it would be your vote. Do not countenance that. Do not bless it. Do not support it. The only answer to realignment is repeal.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Blumenfield, you may close.
I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 41, noes 25. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 8, AB 17. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 17 by Assemblymember Blumenfield, an act relating to criminal justice realignment, making appropriation therefore to take effect immediately. Bill related to the budget.
Mr. Blumenfield.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this bill continues the implementation of the 2011 Public Safety Realignment, which transferred custody of certain low-level felons, parolees, and juveniles from the state to the counties. The bill reflects the input of local public safety, counties, and other stakeholders. It addresses their stated concerns. It clarifies state and local custody and post-release programs. Specifically, this amendment does the following 4 things. Clarifies which felonies are subject to imprisonment in county jail and which are subject to the imprisonment in state prison. It clarifies how custody credits shall be earned and applied toward release. It clarifies which offenders are eligible for post-release community supervision. And finally, it specifies that persons imprisoned for committing a violent or serious felony or who are required to register as a sex offender are not eligible for early release from supervision. It just makes that crystal clear. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Nielsen.
Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, this will not work. This is the more specific public safety realignment that follows a massive change in sentencing that historically that has resulted in disaster after disaster, including the determinate sentence law that Governor Brown signed in 1977. It resulted in the death of Polly Klaas and many, many others. Vast injustices foisted on the people of California, and all who voted for that bill at the time lived to rue the day and say, gee, we didn't mean to do that. Here we go again. This changes sentencing now, and no big deal crimes heretofore under this will be attempted carjacking, assault with a deadly weapon, rape with an unconscious victim. Extra credit will be given to these inmates and parolees. Extra credit that never has been and never yet ahead will be earned. This is all about one thing. You call it extra credit, sentencing reform, or whatever. It's about getting people out of prison, off parole, and diminishing consequences for continued criminality. Diminishing to having no consequences for continued criminality. Again, this bill that's such a disaster has been fixed 5 times already. It is so messy. Well, the next mess will be, as I said, the blood on the streets. You ask your law enforcement professionals, your county sheriffs, your police chiefs, if this makes sense. Now, some of their associations have gone along because they thought they had no choice, because the administration would do something harmful to them if they didn't go along with it because they couldn't accomplish their wonderful purpose of realignment. They do not have the local resources. One fundamental flaw in this whole bloody thing, and it's appalling, that policymakers do not understand the difference between parole and probation. Those are 2 separate worlds. And this attempts to simply take parole and dump it into calling the authority under probation. There are constitutional problems here. This is a violation of Marsy's Law, voted on by the people of California with provision that I wrote myself into Marsy's Law. Fie on Marsy's Law. We don't need to worry about that. No, you don't. What you do need to worry about is the citizens that you represent, who were going to become the victims of crime. 3 Sundays ago, our neighbors are our brother-in-law and sister-in-law. Marilyn got up and left our home at 11 o'clock, 10:30. I watched her drive up the street. Nice country, our little ranch in the countryside, pristine, wonderful. You don't even worry about locking your doors. I left at 11 o'clock, drove into town, got the mail, came back to the house. Then I left about 10 minutes later. At 1 o'clock, I get a call from my sister-in-law. Jim, what time did you leave? In the ensuing time from when I left till they got home from church at 1 o'clock, their home had been burgled. All of the guns and all of the jewelry. Now, that's common. That's run-of-the-mill. And so many people around here say, that's no big deal crime. That's property crime. I'm sorry. I've told parolees for decades, yes, it is. That woman who comes home to that house lives in fear the rest of her life that you will be there when she comes home. That's a big deal. And you're changing sentencing law and foisting injustice on the people of California. Ladies and gentlemen, I guarantee you, you will rue this vote someday, at least in your conscience, because you will know when those horror stories show up in the newspapers and it's all over page 1 that you were a part of facilitating that disaster. Now, I don't consider the Los Angeles Times exactly a conservative Republican newspaper. They have come forth with editorials and stories pointing out the folly of this. The Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors get it, and a lot of other people too. It would be well if we get it, and that means a no vote.
Dr. Halderman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There's some weird statements in this bill, and I would encourage you very, very strongly to read the language of the bill. Currently, as it stands, this bill allows for 50% time off for good behavior if you commit a serious but not violent felony. So what's that? According to this bill, cruel or inhuman abuse of a child. That is a serious but not violent felony, and you just got a half-off sale on it. Next one, you use a hostage as a shield. That's okay. 50% off your sentence. If you throw muriatic acid in someone's face, for example, some cultures that condone honor killing, which ours does not, if you throw acid in someone's face, that's a serious but non-violent felony. You can have a half of your sentence written off. Criminal threats to kill or inflict great bodily injury. About 2 months ago, in a really spectacular bipartisan fashion, all the representatives in Fresno were actually threatened with death. So my colleagues on both sides of the aisle will be probably not that happy to know that if you issue a criminal threat to kill or inflict great bodily injury on an elected, you get half off. Assault with a machine gun. And then rape of drugged victims, that is called a serious nonviolent. I just supported a domestic violence awareness month as someone who has worked on those issues for 25 years. This is a bit of a slap in the face to the women. We ought to be showing more respect than to call those acts nonviolent. I urge a no vote.
Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. 2 points. Quickly on the administrative front, this is AB 17, which is equivalent to our analysis on SB 5X for the Republican members. But secondly, on the fundamental note on 109 and what this bill tries to make less worse than it is to begin with. 109 says basically we're going to take the state's obligations and pass it down to the counties and let them deal with those prisoners for a certain period of time. The problem that we've never talked about is the counties are already over-impact. They're already releasing inmates. In some counties that I represent, if you get sentenced to a year in county jail, you're doing 1 day as it is. They're already over-impacted before the new members come down from 109. This bill will sit there and reduce sentencing, therefore getting cover for those practices of releasing inmates early. This does nothing to protect our residents that we represent in our cities. There's nothing to reform any system that may or may not be out of whack. What this does is stop the prevention of crime by having some deterrent out there for those criminals for getting in trouble in the first place. I urge a no vote.
Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Question of the author.
Without objection.
Current law for female prisons, because my understanding is this allows conversion of female prisons into prisons housing male inmates. And so in the communities like Chowchilla, which I represent, that have female prisons today, the EIR that was done when that went into place stated that if it were to ever be converted to a male prison, that they'd have to go through a full EIR process again just to determine, mitigate for the impacts of the different population. So if this bill passes, will that supersede those requirements, or will those requirements still stand?
I think you're referring to the underlying bill, which is already passed. This bill, I don't think the clarifications are affecting that issue, to my knowledge. But I'm happy to talk with you about it.
Okay, that would be great, because my analysis says that this bill is the one that authorizes that conversion. So I just want to make sure that as part of that conversion, that existing agreements still stand, and EIR processes will have to be gone through to determine what the impacts to the communities are going to be.
I'm happy to work with you
okay.
off on that, and we'll figure that out together.
Mr. Calderon.
I think we need to put this in perspective. Any defendants who are convicted of these crimes and punished, their sentence will be the same as it would have been before this bill. The difference is that if they get 8 years, they'll serve it in the county. They won't serve it in the state penitentiary because there's no room for them in the state penitentiary. And so the difference is if you believe that the state penitentiary loss of freedom is any more of a punishment than loss of freedom through the county, then I guess you're concerned about this bill. But the jail time will be served, the sentences will be imposed, and be imposed, however, at the county level for a list of defendants that through public input, peace officer input, prison official input has determined that these are not the kinds of crimes that are serious under the existing law. Now, there's some laws in there that look and feel, don't feel good. You don't feel good about it, but the reality is that they will be punished and they will serve their sentence. They simply will serve it in the county and not the state penitentiary. I ask for an aye vote.
Mr. Knight.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I think before some of the people in this room got elected, they thought that a jail and a prison were the exact same thing. They used the word synonymously that he's going to jail, and that meant everything. Let me tell you, jail and prison are two different things. And what we are doing today and what we've been doing 5 times, if this bill is so great, and when the people who voted for it the first time thought it was so great, then why do we keep coming back to this floor and amending it time and time again? Because we know it's a terrible bill, and they're trying to make it less terrible. What's going to happen is some of these people are going to stay in county jail. The county jail is run by that sheriff. That's it. Now, I represent part of L.A. County and part of San Bernardino County, the 2 biggest counties in the state of California, like many of you do. And Sheriff Hoops and Sheriff Baca are in charge of those county jails. That means they can change whatever happens in that jail. If many of us that come from L.A. remember the 10% time that was done just a year and a half ago, that meant that people that were in there were doing 10% time. The sheriff was managing the population in that jail, and they were knocking people out at 10% time. A lot of people that, like the good senator said, have had burglary charges, have had charges that we would take and say, those are very violating to us. I know that probably somebody in this room has had a burglary at their house. And that is one of the most egregious crimes that will ever happen to you. So to say that some of these crimes are lower level and we're going to allow the sheriff at our county jail to knock those times down dramatically is just wild. And I think that when speakers stand and they say something that is not true, we should dispute it. I ask for a no vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Blumenfield, you may close.
I just want to respond to a couple of points. One, the last speaker talked about, a lot of these decisions now resting with your local sheriffs. And part of the question is, do we trust our local sheriffs? Is this sort of a question of local control? Do we know that on the local level, they've had a lot more success with recidivism, and they've had a lot more success in general when it comes to prisons and handling that aspect of things, particularly with low-level offenders. So, yeah, part of the question in the underlying bill is about that, whether or not you trust your local sheriff and whether we're willing to experiment with something with a broken system. But that's the underlying issue. We're not relitigating the underlying issue. I do want to respond. One of my colleagues raised a question. I did a little research in the interim. In the bill, it specifically says that CDCR does, we clarify that they have the authority to convert the prisons, but it does not obviate, it does not say that they no longer have to do EIRs and go through the regular procedures. So while it does clarify that they have that authority, and as a legislature we're signing off on giving them that authority, and that's part of the realignment, and it's clarity to that effect, it is not an exemption from EIRs and other important procedures that they need to go through, is my understanding. So with that, again, this bill is about addressing some of the concerns that law enforcement and others have raised after the realignment. Yes, we've had a number of cleanups after realignment on this issue. This is a pretty bold step with the underlying issue of realignment. So it is going to take these cleanup bills, and I wouldn't be surprised if we have some additional cleanup bills. But when you're doing something bold, you've got to expect to try to figure out how to make it work and be willing to fix it along the way. And part of that is listening. And what this amendment, what this bill is, it represents listening. Listening to law enforcement, listening to our locals who came and said, hey, there's a few things we could tweak on this to make this a little bit better. And this bill makes it better. Where the better part, whether you think it was a horrible bill and it's just a little better now, or whether you think it's a great bill and it makes it even better, is up for debate. But either way, I believe this is an important measure, and I ask for your aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 41, noes 26. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 10, AB 32. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 32 by Assemblymember Blumenfield, an act relating to education, finance, and make an appropriation, therefore, to take effect immediately. Bill related to the budget.
Mr. Blumenfield.
This is another technical cleanup bill on the budget. It's a trailer bill. It makes small technical changes to the K through 12 and community college provisions necessary to implement the 2011-2012 budget. Among other things, this bill amends community college deferral amounts to be applied beginning in the 2011-2012 fiscal year and corrects a drafting error in order to authorize payment of the 2010-11 deferral to be paid in the 2011-2012 fiscal year. It also amends the Budget Act of 2011 to add $23.8 million in one-time Prop 98 savings to replace the $23.8 million in other one-time savings that are not available for reappropriation in the 2011-2012 fiscal year. And it also adds education code provisions to clarify that school districts can continue to receive necessary small schools, or NSS funding grants, for middle and junior high schools, as well as elementary and high schools in 2011-2012. These changes authorize school districts that counted grades 7 and 8 the student average daily attendance and instructors for purposes of receiving the NSS grants in the 2010-11 year to account for them in the 2011-2012 year. This is truly small technical changes, and I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm just, again, for clarification, for analysis, just moving quickly here. This is equivalent to our SB 18X analysis on our supplemental file.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 42, noes 22. Senate amendments are concurred in. Okay, we passed the motions before to allow the following bills to be heard. File item 3, SB 6, file item 4, SB 8, and file item 5, SB 13. Mr. Calderon.
Yes, Madam Speaker, can we have a brief Republican caucus in the lounge, or the Rules Committee?
Republican caucus in the Rules Committee room. No passes will be given off the floor.